Speaker, let me address one very important matter, which is the question of the size of government. And indeed, the President, when he addressed this House, made the claim that he had formed the leanest and most effective government in the history of our country. So, Speaker, I want to submit that you can have 10 ministers, another government can have 20 ministers, and the government that has 20 ministers may have a smaller government machinery, a smaller government size than you who have 10 ministers. And I want to demonstrate that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's on record. The record is that the pegging or ranking of officials of the presidency are as follows, Mr. Speaker, since the inception of the fourth Republican dispensation. The Chief of Staff is pegged at the rank below the Speaker of Parliament, but above a cabinet minister who doubles as a member of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, a senior presidential advisor is pegged at the level of a cabinet minister who doubles as a member of Parliament. So a senior presidential advisor, by all intents and purposes, their salaries, emoluments, conditions of service is equivalent to a cabinet minister who doubles as a member of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, a presidential advisor is pegged at the level of a cabinet minister who is not a member of Parliament. A presidential staffer is pegged at the level of a non-cabinet minister who is not a member of Parliament. And a presidential aide is pegged at the level of a deputy minister. These are the rankings since the inception of the fourth Republican dispensation. Mr. Speaker, so if you want to see the size of government and its bearing on the national exchequer, Mr. Speaker, don't just look at ministers and deputy ministers. Look at the government holistically. And Mr. Speaker, I want to submit that if you look at this government holistically, there are ministers, deputy ministers, senior presidential advisors, presidential staffers, presidential aides. President Mahama has formed arguably one of the biggest or largest governments in the history of our country as it relates to the cost on the national exchequer. Mr. Speaker, why do I say this? Check, for example, the President has appointed Dr. Valerie Sawyer as senior presidential advisor in charge of government affairs. Her rank is a cabinet minister who doubles as a member of Parliament. So her salary, her emolument, conditions of service, everything to do with her office is at the same rank as a cabinet minister who doubles as a member of Parliament. That's Speaker, he's appointed a presidential advisor on economy, appointed presidential advisor for 24-hour economy, presidential advisor and special aide to the president, presidential advisor on national anti-corruption program, presidential advisor on diaspora affairs. Mr. Speaker, he goes on to appoint presidential advisor, presidential staffer, and special aide to the vice president, presidential staffer for Black Star Experience, and then presidential staffer for diaspora affairs. Mr. Speaker, then he goes ahead to appoint 5 policy advisors to the vice president. Mr. Speaker, he tells the country that he's appointed a minister in charge of agribusiness, and yet he's appointed director at the presidency in charge of agriculture and agribusiness. My good friend Peter Buama Otukono. Mr. Speaker, he says he will not appoint deputy regional ministers, and he appoints 16 presidential staffers in charge of the 16 regions of our country. Mr. Speaker, I want to submit that these presidential staffers in charge of the 16 regions of our country, in essence, as it relates to the cost on the national exchequer, are in fact, indeed, and in substance, deputy ministers of state. Mr. Speaker, he then appoints, Mr. Speaker, listen carefully, please. Mr. Speaker, he then appoints 1 presidential advisor on media, 4 directors of communication at the office of the president, 5 deputy directors of communication, 2 communication specialists, 5 technical communication assistants, 1 media aide, 1 assistant media liaison officer, 1 communications consultant. Let's look, I've done the mathematics, and I want to submit. Let's look, I've done the mathematics that I want to submit, and I do this not from a partisan lens, but I do this as somebody who had the privilege and honor to serve as Deputy Chief of Staff. I know how it works. In terms of the cost on the national exchequer, the President has appointed 100 ministers and deputy ministers.